And now let's cross over to Jerry.
Thank you so much, Taryn. It's again, as I've been saying for most of the morning and this week, it's that time of year when we need to begin to think about not just ways to keep ourselves safe on the roads and in our homes, but also financially. It is, of course, quite devastating to imagine the amount of people who experience, for example, repossessions, but also, in fact, bankruptcy. It must be one of the worst things to experience, to be put in a position where you suddenly have to say, well, I can't do this, I don't know how we're going to manage, and therefore we need to say goodbye to certain things in our lives. Financial stress is one of the worst things that they say that people can experience. In the studio with us now from Credit Intel, we have the CEO, Mr. Carl Knight. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
Good morning, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about repossession and what it really is and what it means.
Well, it's quite simple. If you don't pay your bond or your vehicle's installment, as well as any other movable assets, then eventually someone's going to come along and they're going to take it back from you. Repossessions are rare. In fact, they do happen, but they are rare because it's not in favor of anyone to take back any property and then try and resell it to someone else. However, it is unfortunately required. You can imagine selling your vehicle to someone else and they don't pay you. What are you going to do? You have to go and get that vehicle back. So you will find that a repossessor will actually come and knock on your door and try and take the vehicle away from you without any fuss. The best thing is, of course, to work together, because at the end of the day it's in your favor. And even though they've repossessed the vehicle, costs will be charged to you and or the property. So you're going to pay for it in the end.
I guess one of the good things about the credit industry at this time is that it doesn't always have to get to the point of repossession. I mean, there are conversations that can be had ahead of repossession if only you and I took it upon ourselves to actually open that dialogue.
Absolutely. As professional debt collectors, we have a myriad of different processes which involves repossession at the end by the sheriff, but the fact of the matter is there are many other steps that we follow. And, you know, one of the first steps is if you are in trouble, one has to actually own up. You have to face it and you have to say, look, how can we get out of this? And unlike the beliefs of many people, we are there to help consumers to actually face their debt, and then we try and help them getting out of it by making a suitable arrangement. For example, a monthly payment arrangement. Of course, if you have a vehicle or a home which you owe on already, you still have to pay your monthly bill plus whatever the arrears are, or percentage of the arrears. What one has to understand is that the banks have been very good, especially with this last 2008-2009 situation, and they've actually helped us tremendously in extending the periods and actually rescheduling debt.
And then there's I think the most daunting of the debt accumulation issues, and that is bankruptcy, because even though some people should be pleading bankruptcy, it seems like the hardest thing ever to do. What is it about the term bankruptcy that is so daunting and so scary?
Bankruptcy is, in fact, just a way of saying, let's cut all our losses, let's start all over. It is unfortunately a necessary evil to protect the market out there, because else businesses and people would go on making more and more debt, and more creditors would be hurt. So if you are in trouble and you owe too many people, it is definitely an option to declare bankruptcy, so you can do what they call sequestration. It lasts for a minimum of 5 years, and then you can apply for rehabilitation. During that period, all your debt is frozen and, in fact, written off entirely.
But before one gets to bankruptcy, there is also a rescue method, is there not? I mean, there are business rescue processes that one can get through if that seems too daunting.
Of course. This is what the whole National Credit Act was about, which has, in my personal opinion, been very, very good for our market and in terms of preventing future credit bubbles. But the fact is that the National Credit Act really is about, firstly, for a person going to see a debt counsellor and rescheduling their debt over a period of time for them to get onto their feet again. And exactly in a similar fashion on the business side by a business applying for business rescue. Unfortunately, in the market out there, there have been a lot of misconceptions, and not everyone is exactly sure of the processes, and many specific procedures have not been tested through court. So there is still a bit of confusion, but we're certainly getting ahead, and over time it will prove what is the best way to go. One of the problems is, for example, when rescheduling debt, the debt counsellor takes a fairly healthy chunk. So one has to consider that when you're actually applying for a debt counsellor.
That you're not getting yourself into a larger hole by having to owe more people.
Exactly.
One of the challenges must be the amount of people who you do try, who the credit industry and debt collectors such as yourself and counsellors try and assist, and yet they, knowing they shouldn't go out and get into more debt, still attempt to do so. And not every company that they try and get debt from has the systems in place to check whether they're in counselling or not.
Absolutely. In fact, you don't need a system in place to check whether anyone is in counselling. If they apply for credit, the onus is up to them to declare it. And of course, if you lie on the application form, that's an entirely different story. It can be construed as fraud.
Yes.
So you don't want to go that route in any event. But yes, you are right. It is a problem. And not everyone, in fact, deliberately goes to apply for credit and then deliberately does not pay. There is a very small percentage of consumers that do that, and businesses. But the truth is that many people get into trouble without realizing it. It is purely a situation of financial sense. You really need to do your budget every month and say, if I'm getting 10,000 Rand, this is what I can spend.
And in fact, I was just going to ask you, are South Africans living above their means?
The sad answer to that is that we in South Africa are financially illiterate. And much like many other parts of the world, normal education far exceeds illiteracy. Financial illiteracy exceeds normal education illiteracy. So far less people know how to balance their bank account at the end of the month than people that can read in the world. And the truth of this is they don't actually teach us these things in school. So it's an education problem.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, of course, it is not that difficult. All you have to do is be able to add and subtract.
And say, this is how much I earn, this is how much I take home, and so I shouldn't really be spending more than that. It is that time of year when people are going to be spending, and sadly, this is when isn't it true that this is the period in which credit cards, for example, are greatly abused as we go into the festive season?
Absolutely. You will still be paying for the next year or two on the Christmas spend. So be very careful when you haul out that credit card.
Yeah. Is there a period of time, because I'm also thinking perhaps in the beginning of the year after this Christmas spend, because you do. I remember being young, Carl, and thinking that 13th check was extra money. I soon realized that it wasn't extra money. And so you do overspend. So is there a time of year when debt collection and people being passed over to debt collectors is in fact more prevalent than other times of the year?
That's a very good question, a very interesting question, and one that I'm fairly qualified to answer because our clients are, we have a vast array of clients from homeowners right through to the large corporates. So, and the truth is, there is no specific time when debts are handed over to us more than others. We do see a bit of a rush before December, but we feel the only way, or the only reason for that is simply because they are going away. Our clients, admin staff are going away for the festive season, so they'd like to pass it through to us before they go away. But that's about the only. Otherwise, it's actually constant throughout the year.
How often do you have to communicate with someone before you hand them over to the next process?
We have currently a 88-step, theoretical 88-step process.
Jeez.
Where it goes straight from you have now been handed over right through to emoluments, attachment order or warrant of execution stage. So it's quite a lengthy process, and we put a mix of everything in there: psychology, pleading, begging, being a bit stronger, you know, especially when it gets to the legal department, issuing of summons and all these kind of things. So things like listing on the bureaus, etc.
It has to be a bit of a frustrating business to some extent to be in, not for you, but particularly for your client, when because you collect on their behalf, they're still not getting paid. I mean, an 88-step program is a long way to go, and it seems as though people are obstinate, or they simply think that it'll go away if they ignore warning letters.
Yes, of course, often consumers will pay on the first few notices, so it doesn't have to go the whole process, but that will happen if you don't work with the debt collectors. So really, at the end of the day, when a client hands over, obviously that's last resort for them, although we do have early stage collections that we do as well, but they would hand it over to us, and then from there on we would embark on this process, which really, the quicker you work with us, the less it's going to cost you, the consumer, as well. And of course, it is a lengthy process. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Carl, for joining us in the studio. Carl Knight from Credit Intel in the studio with us, just having a chat about debt. This is the time of year when we tend to spend more. Of course, some people do believe that their credit cards is just extra money the bank has made available to them. But sadly, you will have to pay these back amongst other bills that you might be having over this period of time. It's best just to be vigilant in terms of what it is that you bring in on a monthly basis and what it is that you can let out. There's nothing worse than someone chasing you for their money, I tell you.